Well, I moved down here from Binghamton, New York to be grandma, and never regretted it. Love the weather here, and of course this really increased the amount of growing time I had to consider down here. And when I moved into this home, well, the inside was just the way I wanted it, but the outside was pitiful. I mean, just nothing. Just the obligatory boxwoods in the front and a couple of trees, and that was about it. Well, along came Darren Brocklebank, knocking on my door, I believe, really. I think he's self-referred, offering to mow my lawn. Back then, that's all he did. So I thought, okay, looks like an honest young man. I'll give him a chance. He looked like a high schooler. So he started mowing my lawn faithfully, just with a push mower, no big riding mower or anything. And then after a while, along came Heather. And he introduced her as his girlfriend, and so they'd mow the lawn together. She'd bring a mower, he'd bring a mower, and I'd look out in the backyard, and she'd be mowing in one direction, he'd be mowing in the other, and occasionally they'd meet and share a kiss. It was just so tender. I thought, I think this is the real thing. And after a while, I had this sunroom built on, and honestly, I was so tired of looking at that barren landscape outside, or the lack of. And Darren, at about that time, was starting up his landscaping business. He was a very enterprising young man, ambitious in a good way. And he wondered if I might like to be one of their test cases, I guess, sort of a pilot program for Metro Greenscape. And I said, I got a good tax refund. I think this is the time to do it. And so they just set about, Heather doing all this planning. She hand drew this beautiful schematic for me and worked with me about what kind of flowers I wanted, what shrubs I wanted, spent hours with me. And they came out here with, they were so excited the day they were starting this up. They came out, somebody was driving some sort of tiller machine, and they were just so excited. The family was out here, and they just dug up and did all the beds that they had committed to, and even in one area telling me they'd hit some concrete, so they had to build up instead of digging down. They were wonderful. One of my Bradford pear trees part of it got blown down in the storm, and a firefighter neighbor borrowed a chainsaw and cut it down for me, and it looked awful out there. So I didn't call Darren, but someone from his firm called me. I still think it was God, because not God calling, but Jamie, I think it was. Yeah, he called me and said, you contacted us? And I said, well, no, I didn't, but as a matter of fact. And we started this conversation about what to do, because the lawn in the front was so depressed because of the tree had been there and the root system had compromised the lawn. It needed to be graded, and I really wanted that stump out. So he talked to Darren, and Darren said, well, since she was one of our early customers, we'll do it. We'll seed and all that. Actually, they had to put sod down because it got later. And so they built up the lawn, put the sod down, and before they came, about a week before they came, I had a dream. I had a very vivid dream. I dreamed that where that pear tree used to be was now this kind of a weeping cherry. And it was so vivid, I woke up and I went and looked out my front door, expecting to see that tree there. Of course it wasn't, but I called Darren, and I said, Darren, you're not going to believe this, but I think you're supposed to plant a tree there. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, Brenda, if you go get a tree and it just happens to be there when we come, we'll put it in for you. And they did. So now that weeping cherry tree out there and the lawn is a result of their recent work for me. Well, if somebody asked me, in fact, I have mentioned many times when people ask me, who did your work? And I've told them, of course, because why would I not recommend Darren and Heather's work? Metro Greenscape is, as they showed me even recently with the recent work they did out front that they maintain their reputation of integrity, their appreciation of beauty, of course, and their serious approach to customer relations. They value their customers. The fact that they considered me a valued customer even this long since they did the original work for me and were willing to come back and do some corrective work out front for me speaks volumes about who they are. It's interesting. I always wanted a mimosa tree in my yard. Some of the things they planted for me were of sentimental value, like the corabels out back. But I always wanted a mimosa tree because when my children were small, in New Jersey, there was a large mimosa tree over their sandbox. And it was just such a beautiful thing. And here, they're so natural down here. Well, I found someone in the next neighborhood who had one. And I stopped to commend her on how beautiful it was. And she said, well, you can have some sprouts. They come up, naturally. So my grandchildren and I went over and dug up some sprouts and put them in buckets on the wagon and brought them back. And when Darren was creating that bed alongside the driveway, I asked him if he could take one that I had potted and had grown and put it in. And he said, sure, he'd do that for me. So he did. Well, no sooner was it planted than all the leaves fell off, and I thought, oh well, we made an effort. But now the next spring, wouldn't you know, it started leafing and growing, and now it's about 10 feet tall. I call it my resurrection tree. And that's just part of the gracious nature of Darren, what he'll do for you, just out of the kindness of his heart. I'm Brenda Miles, and I found a local landscaper who made my landscape come alive, to look consistent with the way the inside of my house looked. Metro Greenscape.